Amanda, again, I'd like to come back to the question of depending on where you are and depending on where you want to go has a very real and direct impact on the results. So if you're coming into an environment like Taylor has, where you're partnering in a country where there's commitment, there is action that follows the commitment, there are resources that follows, that's great. But that's not always the reality, is it?
Absolutely not. I'm on the private equity side, and we invest in development stage critical minerals. And I think one of the reasons that we're here at this conference is because of the partners available here, which are, Saudi Arabia's done a wonderful job at being very clear at what they have to offer, what they're looking for. It's a very stable environment. Whereas many of the mining jurisdictions in the world, when you're looking to invest in a new project, are frankly less stable. They know they want investment, but the roadmap to developing, exploring, developing, constructing, building, and operating a mine is much, much more complicated. And then eventually having that product feed into the critical minerals supply chain becomes more complex. And I think the more it's true, as was stated earlier, having a partner who's an established operator who has experience guiding some of these junior companies. Partnership is probably one of the best ways junior companies can go with more established operators into becoming successful, because doing it by themselves is difficult, especially in an increasingly complex global supply chain.
But the additional complexity, Amanda, is the money. There isn't necessarily the funding required. The money has to come from somewhere.
So, yes, I was very lucky to prepare for this. I was doing another panel earlier on risk in the mining sector that was all investors in mining discussing what they saw as the biggest risks. And policy and resource nationalism was what they identified as one of the things that keeps them up at night. And as it's taken longer and longer to get through the exploration development cycle into production, the timing for risk has, the chance of something going wrong, the longer it takes to build it. I think Robert Friedland was on earlier saying that they found Kamoa originally, like the first drill hole was like 25 years ago. That's how long it took. The time it takes and the complexity of building a modern mining company, we've all experienced it, but it has gotten longer and it has gotten much more complex. And I think the need for good policy has become more important than ever, because it's the biggest risk to getting enough capital into the sector. Being able to trust that the policy environment will be consistent and not change, so that you can get through the very long, complex, and expensive mining development cycle is going to be essential to being able to find the minerals and develop them going forward. If I could just sort of jump in there slightly, while I completely agree with Martin in that the industry is largely self-regulating when it comes to standards, I think potentially that's been one of the problems. When something goes wrong in the mining world, it's all over the front pages, and it's actually the exception, not the rule. 99% of mining companies actually self-regulate and perform to an extraordinarily high standard, a higher standard than that is often what's required of them in their host jurisdiction based on standards. But they don't do a particularly good job of communicating that. And in addition to that, there are bad actors that don't. Like, there are always exceptions, and those guys are on the front pages. Everybody sees that tailings dam disaster. Everybody sees the guys who unfortunately occasionally die because of bad practice. And to bring it back, I think that one of the things that, while 99% I do genuinely believe are good self-regulating, I don't think that's good enough anymore. And I think organizations like the ICMM came out with originally the tailings dam standard in response to those big public disasters. They're now working on a new standard at a much higher level that can manage and mitigate. The Copper Mark, the Canadian Mining Alliance, and the ICMM are trying to come up with a new global standard for ESG that everybody follows. And I think that while we are self-regulating, I'm not sure that's good enough anymore. I think we need something we can benchmark to on a global scale. So when you do have really good companies like Sentiment and Modern who do a great job, they can benchmark that and show people that they are doing it. Because I think that self-regulation is potentially not enough anymore.
So there are a couple of things that you've both raised. One of the things that I think is key in all of this is the rap, the bad rap that we've talked about almost all day today, and the roots thereof. And I think we can all agree, whether it's in the room or up here on stage, that it's not everybody who is not acting responsibly. It is the small handful who are making the headlines. So in the context of that, let's look at some of those opportunities. To what extent, outside of the policy framework that is being developed in order to try to benchmark in the industry, where do you think we need to start thinking differently about the opportunities that are presented and how we engage around mining externally? We can sit and have a particular conversation in this room, but not everybody is in this room who's going to criticize and say, well, you should have done this and this and this, and look how bad mining industry. I'd like for you, Amanda, if you can begin with that, and then Dr. Malik, if I could come to you after that, please.
We've all talked about the, frankly, bad reputation that the mining industry as a whole has because of a few small bad actors. I think that Saudi Arabia, for example, has done an incredible job at understanding the incredible demand coming and necessity of minerals and materials and what a role they're going to play both in global economic development and the energy transition. And I think it's well understood in some places, in some areas, but the mining industry as a whole has done a horrible job both at showing what an incredible contribution they make to economies and to the world in terms of the materials they supply. And I think that, I'm not sure exactly, to be perfectly honest, but I know it needs to do something to change that reputation. And as much as Saudi Arabia has done an incredible job, frankly, at raising the profile of the mining industry and investing in the mining industry, it's going to take more than just Saudi Arabia. It's going to take a lot of multi-stakeholder engagement to raise the importance level of investing in this sector if the world's going to energy transition. I was going to say, in a former life, I used to run an organization called Women in Mining, of which there are many members here today. And one of the things I found most interesting is mining has one of the worst participation rates for women, and that has, in any industry globally. It's not specific to any one area. And mining, I mean, while STEM is incredibly important, mining also employs just about, it takes a village to build a mine. There are accountants and lawyers and cafeteria ladies, and there's, you name it, if there's a profession, you can probably do it on a mine, and it is part of the mining business. It's one of those businesses that is so varied. And our biggest issue was that women didn't want to join the sector. They didn't see mining law or mining engineering or mining, let alone 50% of all geology graduates globally are female, yet the mining industry doesn't have them. And that's because of this reputation issue. And look, I've been blessed. I love my job, and the mining industry has been nothing but good to me. But I think to attract talent, we need to raise the profile of the mining industry and let people know that it does make such an incredible contribution, and it is a great place to work.